From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Yeah, it'd be a shame if they contracted the Ebola virus when they're out there, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it? How you doing? It's Monday. It's begun to rain quite heavily in Greater Manchester. It's Monday, September 23rd, 2019. I'm Richie Allen. Got a terrific programme for you lined up. The first live radio show of the week. Live right now on Fab Radio 2 in Manchester. Triggerwarning.tv, TuneIn Radio, and multiple platforms around the world.
Richie Allen.
That's the one. Welcome to the show. Tweet me. It's at Richie Allen Show.
It's the Richie Allen Show. Broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
And I'm pretty sure that will be fine today. The writer, the screenwriter, the author of a best-selling Amazon #1 book, and the Hollywood whistleblower Tiffany FitzHenry will be on the programme today. She'll join me in around about 30 minutes' time. You don't want to miss that. Lots to talk about with Tiffany. And that's going to be an extended conversation. Your thoughts welcome on Twitter as usual. This is your Richie Allen Show, as I've said. Hope you had a good weekend. Lots to talk about before we welcome Tiffany to the programme. Lots to get into as usual. Eh? Yeah, it's never a dull moment, is there, in this old business. Yeah, nice weekend. Nice relaxing weekend this weekend. The sporting fixtures didn't go my way, but I've long since given up. I didn't mean the Ebola thing, by the way. That's just the sort of stupid Shiite that I come out with. We don't wish Ebola on anybody. Thing about the royals going to Africa, though, is they're apologising in South Africa. They're apologising for apartheid. If you didn't have anything to do with it, why are you apologising? It reminds me of the film Snatch, when Brad Pitt, who plays, what's his name? What's the name of the travelling man played by Brad Pitt? Anyway, Turkish, played by Jason Statham, says, I'm sorry, when his mother is killed in a caravan fire. And Brad Pitt's character says, did you do it? You don't apologise for that which you didn't do, nor did you have any hand, act or part in. Apologise for slavery in Africa, and slavers, and beating and murdering people and putting them into ships and transporting them around the world. 'Twas dreadful, but I didn't do it. So I'm not going to apologise, is my take on that sort of thing. Spoke at length this morning about Thomas Cook, the UK operator, great British name, great British business, 19th century, and apparently the first of 155,000 British tourists are being flown back home today after the collapse of travel agent Thomas Cook. So the UK Civil Aviation Authority is in charge of the repatriation. They're organising it. And we are told repeatedly it's the biggest in peacetime. There were hopes over the weekend that some rescue package could be agreed or negotiated to save Thomas Cook, but it didn't happen. 22,000 jobs at risk worldwide, 9,000 in the UK. The boss, Peter Fankhauser, said the collapse was a matter of profound regret. Fankhauser and a tiny number of people, of course, are responsible for the failure of the company. 22,000 hard-working people pay the price. I explained this morning how it could and would and should have been rescued, so I won't get into that now. It's a dreadful thing, it really is. Hilarity ensued, though, this morning. LBC is a national radio station in the UK. It is. And it had a reporter hanging around a Thomas Cook shop in Wales, somewhere in Wales, in Cymru. Did I say that right? In Cymru, in Wales. And a little old Welsh lady rocked up. She has a holiday booked. Well, be Jesus, she's not too happy about the way things are going.
Well, I don't know. That's why I came here to find out. To see if I can see what's going to happen with my money.
How much did you pay for the holiday, if you don't mind me asking?
£2,000.
£2,000. And do you think you'll get any of it back?
I better get it back. I'll go off. I better get it.
I'll go off.
Get it back, I'm telling you.
I better get it back, I'm telling you.
I'll go off.
Who were you going with to Turkey?
Oh, me and my mother and my younger sister.
Was it a special holiday, a particular reason?
Just first time holiday.
Oh, first time you've ever gone on holiday? Oh gosh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I know.
You're looking forward to it, I imagine.
I was.
Yeah.
I ain't amused. I ain't happy about
amused.
Happy about it either.
Yeah, I can imagine. So what part of Turkey were you going to?
I'm not sure my mother got the details.
Not got a Scooby-Doo.
Right, I see.
But my mother was going to come in here tomorrow with me.
How did you find out?
How did I find out?
Yeah, the Thomas Cook had gone bust.
It's all on Facebook and everything. It's all on Wales Online and that. It's all on news.
It's on Facebook and everything. Yeah, a little bit of hilarity. This is the sort of stuff I find funny. But 22,000 people are out of work. We might come back to that later on in the week. So the United Nations, then, there's a climate summit. Did you hear that in the news? Did you? Several key world leaders are not at the UN climate summit, including US President Donald Trump. They've not shown up. There is a special UN climate action summit, and it opened in New York this morning. Now, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said that countries would only be allowed to speak at the summit if they came with action plans to reduce carbon emissions. So the Irish Prime Minister, or the Irish Taoiseach, Mr. Leo Varadkar, the Merry Indian, he'll be allowed to speak because the Irish have decided even to raise carbon taxes from 20%, is it, up to 80% per tonnage. Oh, Jesus, get it right, Richie. I've got the notes somewhere and I just can't reach them. But yeah, the Irish have agreed to increase carbon taxes, which won't be good for businesses and people. Of course it won't. So he'll be allowed to speak. Brazil and Saudi Arabia have declined to appear as well. But this morning, the Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg spoke. Now this, of course, comes after the weekend when apparently several million people took part in a global climate strike. Youth activists around the world on Friday led a global climate strike, and Greta Thunberg spoke a bit earlier on in New York, and well, I find it a bit creepy. Not playing it for laughs, I find it a bit creepy. The audio you're about to hear is genuinely Greta Thunberg. This is what she actually said. I've decided to add in a bit of music for effect, not to be childish, but just to make a point. This is Greta Thunberg. Here she is.
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words, and yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering, people are dying, entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you? For more than 30 years, the science has been crystal clear. How dare you continue to look away and come here saying that you're doing enough when the politics and solutions needed are still nowhere in sight?
Wow. That's disturbing stuff, isn't it? That was Greta Thunberg. That was just a little bit of the speech given earlier on. And, well, hang on. And the Oscar goes to... Hang on. Greta Thunberg for the UN Climate Summit speech 2019. That's a girl, and I don't join in with some of the stuff that's tweeted at or said about Greta Thunberg, because I always remember, and I'm not trying to curry favour with anybody now, but I always remember that this is a child who's on the spectrum, right? Okay, it's a child and is maybe not in control of herself and maybe isn't acting of her own volition. Maybe she's not acting of her own volition. That's extraordinary stuff, That's extraordinary stuff. Here's Sky News correspondent Hannah Thomas-Peter Hannah Thomas Peter was in the room. Here's her take on what Greta did and said.
Well, I think what you heard in Greta's voice there reflects the emotions of the people who came onto the streets in record numbers just a few days ago. Fear, outrage, alarm, and a sense that not enough is being done quickly enough. That was a very emotional speech from Greta Thunberg, a little bit of a departure from the more subdued delivery she normally gives. But she is chiming with the science, which tells us that at the moment the world is not on track to meet its commitments under the Paris Climate Agreement, and that even if everybody did what they've already promised, that still wouldn't be enough. I've just interviewed the president of Costa Rica, who's told me that the thing that is missing is not technology, it is not knowledge, it is not ability, it is simply willpower and will, and specifically political will. So that's the real frustration as global leaders gather here at the United Nations in New York for the climate summit. Those who are speaking here have been told that if they want a slot at the podium, they have to bring concrete plans and enhanced commitments to really drive the ambition forward for the international community. But is that really going to happen? I think what you're going to hear from is some of the big polluters, like the Brits, for example, are going to make some new commitments, but some big names at the moment are missing. For example, Australia and not least America.
Yeah, America hasn't showed up, Australia hasn't showed up. She said the science chimes with Greta, but it doesn't though. I want you to listen to something you've heard before, but it's been a while. It's the physicist and meteorologist Piers Corbyn. Yes, the brother of the Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn. Here's Piers Corbyn speaking to Talk Radio on August 1st. And everything he says is true. Not because I want it to be true, because it is categorically true. I've begun to use this lovely word, unimpeachable. I love that word. Unimpeachable. This is above reproach, this little speech given by Piers Corbyn about the evidence. And you need to hear this, and you need to share this with people. Even if they scream at you, and they go bananas, and they go a little bit cuckoo, and they make a little bit of wee-wee in their underpants, you need to share it with them, because what he says is true.
If you look at the data shows that when you analyse temperatures and carbon dioxide, that carbon dioxide levels follow temperatures. So after the last ice age, for example, Antarctic temperatures, and you measure these by ice cores, went up, and then about 800 years later, the amount of carbon dioxide in the world went up. And the reason for the warming now, the reason for the extra CO2 now is a delayed effect from the medieval warm period. In the medieval warm period, extra CO2, which was emitted from the upper levels of the oceans, got subsumed by extra cold water from melt in Greenland going under the sea. So that cold water, which absorbs more CO2 than warm water, gobbled up extra CO2 that then circulates under the Atlantic, under the Pacific, and comes out again about 600 to 800 years later and emits its CO2. So that's why we have larger CO2 now. Man will have no effect on this CO2.
Man will have no effect on the CO2. Everything he said about the medieval warming period, okay, it's all accurate. It isn't something he's just decided to make up, or something he is saying because he is paid for, or he is paid by oil and gas. He isn't. This is how would you describe Piers? He's an old lefty, I suppose. And I suppose that would put him at odds in the 21st century with those who claim to be on the left, because they're pushing this agenda. He's a physicist and a meteorologist, and he's saying, no, this isn't true. Here's the science. And he said very clearly, and it's very important for you to understand, CO2 follows temperature, not the other way around. Very important to understand that.
CO2. And if man was really worried about CO2, if the powers that be were honestly worried, they should address the fact that termites produce 10 times more CO2 than man.
Yeah, termites actually, which dwell in houses. I couldn't think of that this morning. Yes, termites dwell in houses. They produce 10 times more CO2 than man, termites. This is true again. Very important, this. Because it blows. the climate religious zealots, it blows them out of the water that we are warming the planet through our activity in such a way that in 20 or 30 years, the planet will be beset right across the globe by weather catastrophes, which will drown us all. It's a lie, and it's predicated on a massive lie, which he's taking to the cleaners now. Facts trump feelings. These are facts.
Man is only 4% of the total amount of CO2 produced, and the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere is only 0.04%. So man is 4% of 0.04% of the atmosphere.
And presumably...
which is a trivial amount, but the point is that if man's CO2 is important, then the rest of nature has to obey man. So the termites have to obey man and produce more CO2 when the termites do. I mean, it's a conspiracy of nature. That's what they're telling you to believe in. It's a completely insane conspiracy of nature.
And presumably
there's no evidence for it whatsoever.
No evidence.
Whatsoever.
And presumably...
There's only evidence against.
And presumably the minuscule makeup of this country in terms of the man-made CO2 in that 4% is even less, right?
It's, dare I say, like pissing in the wind.
Pissing in the wind. What's the reason for it then? Well, deindustrialization of the planet, yes, perhaps. Transforming the way that human beings live, control over every aspect of our lives, from dawn till dusk, yes. There are a number of reasons for it, but the science is not sound. The UK, the US, the French, the Spanish, the Dutch, the German media will tell you the science is settled. It isn't settled. It is a crock of shit. It really is. And guys like Piers Corbyn now, despite his academic credentials, which are very impressive, are precluded, apart from the occasional interview on Talk Radio, which is a conservative radio station, he's pretty much precluded from appearing on ITV, Channel 4 or the BBC. Even Sky News. 'Tis mad. But that's the way it is. I'll give the final word on this climate nonsense. Greta Thunberg's speech was very disturbing, wasn't it? Again, that's a young woman, God love her, who isn't acting of her own volition, I wouldn't imagine. Didn't look very well addressing that summit in New York earlier today, I would say. Now, you might say it's a bit cheeky to say that. I'm only telling you what I observed when I watched it. Anyway, I'll give the final word, and I've no time for Sky News. I've no time for Rupert Murdoch's News Score or News International. No time for it. But this from Sky News Australia was very good. The anchor reads an email that came in from a viewer. Very good is this. Have a listen. A viewer in Australia wrote to Sky News Australia in an email and entitled his or her email, entitled it Grow Up. And the anchor reads it, and it is good.
I thought I'd share it with you. It's called Growing Up. Few commentaries on this global warming hoax have had greater relevance than this. I think I might send it to Al Gore. And it says this: to all the school kids going on strike for climate change, you're the first generation who've required air conditioning in every classroom. You want TV in every room, and your classes are all computerised. You spend all day and night on electronic devices. More than ever, you don't walk or ride bikes to school, but you arrive in caravans of private cars that choke suburban roads and worsen rush hour traffic. You're the biggest consumers of manufactured goods ever and update perfectly good, expensive luxury items to stay trendy. Your entertainment comes from electric devices. Furthermore, the people driving your protests are the same people who insist on artificially inflating the population growth through immigration, which increases the need for energy, manufacturing and transport. The more people we have, the more forest and bushland we clear. The more of the environment that's destroyed. How about this? Tell your teachers to switch off the aircon. Walk or ride to school. Switch off your devices and read a book. Make a sandwich instead of buying manufactured fast food. No, none of this will happen. Because, the piece says, you're selfish, badly educated, virtue-signalling little turds inspired by the adults around you who crave a feeling of having a noble cause while they indulge themselves in Western luxury and unprecedented quality of life. The piece ends by saying, wake up, grow up and shut up until you're sure of the facts before protesting.
Yes, whoever wrote that email, good stuff. I'll tell you what I'll do. 23 minutes past the hour. We'll get Tiffany on in a second. Let's listen to the Greta address, or the 1 minute segment of it, without me messing around with Barber's Adagio for strings music. My accompaniment there, my accompanying music. Listen to it on its own. This is not right, this.
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words.
Stolen her childhood? Fuck, what's going on there?
And yet, I'm one of the lucky ones.
But she's one of the lucky ones.
People are suffering. People are dying.
What the fuck?
Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?
And then the Muppets in the audience are spontaneously, or maybe not spontaneously, breaking into applause. You'd be aghast, wouldn't you? If you were there watching that, you'd be aghast. Because somebody has terrified the bejesus out of that woman. That young woman, that young lady.
For more than 30 years, the science has been crystal clear. How dare you continue to look away and come here saying that you're doing enough when the politics and solutions needed are still nowhere in sight?
Yeah. I presume now, at this stage, the entire address is available online. You can watch it later on. Get away from it. You can watch it when the programme is over. It's Monday's show, September. Don't be getting ahead of yourself. September 23rd, 2019. This is the Richie Allen Show. I'm going to be speaking with Tiffany FitzHenry live from Atlanta in a couple of minutes' time. We should have done it on Thursday. We had a bit of... we didn't have a technical problem in the area where we are based. Internet problems. The internet kept dropping in and out on Thursday. I'm assured that it's fine now. Well, it's been fine since Friday. So there you are. We're all good. Hi to Mwinga and to Patricia Braunschweiler. How you doing, Patricia? To Susan. How you doing, Susan? Patricia tweets, anybody who is actually paying attention will know that Greta is being used for an agenda. It's very hard to watch that. Liz tweets, science is bought and paid for. How you, Liz? Hi to Joe Public. Susan says she's got many conditions, OCD along with anxiety, eating disorders amongst others, apparently, and Asperger's to top it off. It's actually very disturbing to hear her. It is very sad. What a waste, says Susan. Thanks, Susan. Hi to Patrick. Hi to Jason. Hi to William. William tweets, Greta is saying we've stolen her childhood, but she seems to be forgetting that she's still a child and should stick to being one. Just a thought. Hi to Joe. I mentioned Joe Public. He says, it sounds like a very bad Hollywood script. Mwinga says she read her lines perfectly, surprised she didn't win at the Emmys last night. Yeah. I'm reluctant to levy, to throw any personal criticism at this young woman. Again, because I'm not convinced that she's really aware of what's happening to her. And I think I've seen this before. I think what's happening is she's being induced I'm not going to use crass terminology like brainwashed, but she's being convinced, that's probably the best way of putting it, that there is this terrible crisis facing humanity and that death for everyone and everyone's children is imminent unless we do something immediately. And she's been convinced that she herself has got some role to play in this apocalyptic fight. This is where mythomania comes in. Mythomania is a terrible thing in adults. I've talked about mythomania many times. It's one of my bugbears. I talk a lot about it. You see it a lot in the independent media. You see it in people like Bob Geldof and Bono, whom Tiffany's going to mention at some stage during our conversation. People like those. Mythomania. You know, the notion that there can be no justice, that there can be no triumph without your own personal involvement. And I think that's the case with Greta. She's been convinced that she's a central character in this titanic battle of good versus evil. The good are the innocent children who haven't done any harm to anybody, and the bad are the lazy, old, vacuous, empty-headed older people who just go about the earth destroying everything in their path and ruining everything for the children coming behind us. That's exactly what I was striving to, that's what I was trying to think of. That's the best way to put it. She's been convinced that she is a central character in an apocalyptic good versus evil battle. She's been convinced that she's really important and central to the victory that must be won. That's mythomania. But in Greta's case, it is involuntary mythomania. She doesn't know what's going on. So maybe we'll give her a break, maybe. But maybe I'll just mind my own business. You can say what you want. That's what free speech is, isn't it? Hey? Hi to John Lavelle. How you doing, John? John supposes that the girl is ill. She's petrified. She's 17, so she's technically an adult. My dad was 16 and landed in France and given a gun, says John. Fair enough, John. Sean tweets, autistic kids can't see the wood for the trees. She's being used by the elite and her parents, who after the Nobel Peace Prize money, about $1 million she's been nominated for, who are after the Nobel Peace Prize money, alleges Sean. Time to get Tiffany on the programme. Bruce Springsteen is 70 today. Isn't that brilliant, eh? Happy birthday, Bruce. This is the Richie Allen Show. There is none like it. It belongs to you. Welcome to it. We join Tiffany FitzHenry in Atlanta in a couple of minutes' time. Monday's programme, September 23rd. Lovely to be with you. Thanks for tuning in. Back in a couple of minutes. Don't go anywhere. Right, let's get into it. Let's welcome back to the programme. Before we do, I think she's a pretty extraordinary woman. I mean, she's achieved an incredible amount in her time. She is the author of the best-selling trilogy, The Oldest Soul. She's a public speaker. She has written screenplays that have been incredibly well received. She's working on a documentary at the moment. And when we spoke on Thursday, sadly very briefly because of the issues we had here, she talked about writing a pilot, which was her introduction to Hollywood Tinseltown and how it began to open her eyes into, well, the darker side of the, of that place that so many millions of people dream about, Hollywood, Los Angeles. Let's welcome back to the programme. I will be tweeting out a link to her website where you can read her really well-written articles, and they're very well thought out. She's in Atlanta. Let's say hi once again to Tiffany FitzHenry. How you doing, Tiffany?
Hey, how are you? It's so good to be here.
It's good to have you back on. And again, apologies for last week, but I think we're good now. Good. Please God, let's say a rosary, let's say a novena, as we would say in Ireland. Yeah.
I know.
Serious stuff going down, and I'm fascinated by a number of facets of your work, not least pedophilia in Hollywood, and of course the tweets you put out are very succinct and very thought-provoking. Why so many stars and actors and actresses, why they are almost aligned on social issues of the day, and why we see them kind of graduating kind of more and more beyond their day job of appearing in films to getting involved in social justice issues. We'll get into that as well. Just remind our listeners, Tiffany, actually, do you know what? It's a blessing in disguise we're doing this today, because like any other talk show, our audience is bigger on a Monday than it is on a Thursday, so I think it's just as well anyway. So remind us again about writing the pilot and how that kind of opened your eyes. It was an exciting time, of course, when people say, that's brilliant, what you've written there. Let's have a chat about it. But then you saw a different side to Los Angeles and Tinseltown. Remind us.
Yeah, Hollywood does like no other in this way, where they really swoop in, when they see that you've got a talent that they can use to do what they want to do. And writing particularly, they need the writers. They need the writers, right? The writers are the ones that write the content.
Yeah.
So they really need to bring these people in. So when you write something, so for example, I'd been writing a bunch of scripts. My kids were still little, but I'd been in Hollywood when I was in my early 20s. I studied film and went to work for some really big people in my early 20s, and saw that things were pretty odd. Things just weren't really great, and I thought, if I stay here, I'll probably lose my soul. And I just felt that it was dark. I didn't feel that I could be myself and be there. So I ended up going back to Florida, where I was from. I ended up getting married, having kids, all that stuff. And then when my kids were starting school, I started working again and writing some screenplays and getting some attention right away. And then when I wrote this one pilot, this was in 2012, it became a big deal. The most powerful people in Hollywood just descended. And it was, okay, this is going to go to ABC or NBC. Now I have the biggest agents in Hollywood. And it can be so seductive, right? Because it's this closed power system that only a select few will ever, get to see behind the curtain. And they're bringing you into this world of these big agencies. And, there's cars that I've never even seen. I don't even know what these cars are, at these agencies. I don't even know what kind of car that is. It's a $1 million sports car. We don't even know. So it's very seductive, and you're kind of like, wow, I must be so great, and you kind of think, wow. But what I realized very quickly was that it is about the machine, and it's about you serving the machine and getting you into place where you could write what they want you to write, because they can't do it. You know what I mean? If they could do it, they wouldn't need people like me, but they need people like me. But then someone like me, who, as soon as you get in behind the veil and you see what it all really is, very few people, to my knowledge, I'm one of the first to come out and tell the world, this is really not what people think it is. This is a machine that's meant, and it's, to control the minds of the people. And I was, actively given agendas to write about. I have, all kinds of stories about that. They're going to be going in my documentary about the agendas that we're all starting to see in our content, and we're all starting to notice, and we're all starting to go, wait a minute, why are these celebrities trying to socially engineer us? Well, they've been doing it all along, but now we're really starting to see it. And now, someone like myself is coming out and saying, yep, it's happening. It's real, because I don't care about losing my place in Hollywood. I don't care. I would never, I don't want any part of any of that. It's dark.
You couldn't live with that. So to get this straight, they looked for talented writers like you, and you are a very good writer, Tiffany. I mean, I interview a lot of people who write and who blog, and I'm lucky I get some good writers on. But, as a journalist who's worked at every level of the media, I recognise a good writer. You're an excellent writer. You understand how to structure an article. Very rare that these days, particularly in the independent media. No, I mean that. No, take that as a compliment. I mean that. So they look at you and they go, right, yeah, we like your pilot, yeah. Here are some things we'd like you to write about. So they come up with some premises, because we see, on the outside, we see Hollywood, this wonderful place with all the stars, with Angelina, with Brad, with Tom Cruise and everybody. I'll show my age now, all the 80s movie stars. And we think, wonderful. But really, you came to believe that the industry itself is one big programming machine that exists not to entertain us and to give us a break from the grind of daily life, but in fact it's more sinister. It exists to lead us down certain pathways, to think certain things. That's what you mean.
Oh, absolutely. I've shared before, there's documents that people at the highest levels in screenwriting and would get, and I would get these documents, and they would be telling us what all these networks are looking for and where these ideas come from. I don't know, Bilderberg, someplace they make these decisions, right? And it's like, okay, ABC Family is looking for things that they want shows about 20-year-olds who are incarcerated. They want shows about LGBT, teens. They want, and so an industrious person like myself who can write, I could have a field day just selling shows left, right, and center. You know what I mean? Because if I were to write to the agenda, and I know what that is. And I got news for you. so do they. Anyone who's smart enough to be doing that knows what they're doing. If you're smart enough to be writing these shows, you're smart enough to know what you're doing.
Yeah, of course. There must be men and women thinking, yeah, why do they keep asking me to write about these issues? You know, these particular issues. Yeah.
With the CIA, you know what I mean? And this is what's going on in Hollywood. It is absolutely the most well-oiled machine in terms of the way they churn out this content and the way they disguise it. And the reason that they do that is because when we hear stories and when we look at what we believe is an artistic creation, it goes into us in a level that's very, very deep. We become really suggestible when we believe we're hearing a fairy tale, when we believe we're hearing a story. There's a quote that I have on my Twitter on the top of it that says, "Art is God talking." And that's kind of my quote, because I realized when these people wanted me to manipulate what I was writing, it was because they wanted to kind of cut that divine off, and they wanted to insert, their agenda that they want to have over the world versus God's agenda. It's a very spiritual thing. The whole fight is actually very spiritual.
We'll come back to the spiritual because I'm very interested in that. Tiffany FitzHenry is our guest, and we've got Tiffany for as long. I mean, we're on air till 7 o'clock UK time, but we'll stay with Tiffany as long as she's happy to do that. She's in Atlanta this morning. Website is tiffanyfitzhenry.com. Link to it. Follow her on Twitter. There's only one Tiffany FitzHenry, by the way. There's only one. Yeah, it's great, isn't it? It's great to be unique like that. There's only you. David tweets, Hollywood, loads of tweets, by the way. We've got loads of time, so I can interject with some tweets from time to time. David tweets, Hollywood was originally used for convincing the whole world that diamonds were worth something, says David. That's a tweet from David. I want to say hi to Proof of Delusion. A lot of Tiffany's readers have joined this program for the first time today as well. You're very welcome to the program. I think you might stick around. We talk about about a lot of the themes that Tiffany writes about. We discuss these regularly on this program. So give us an idea then of the types of things currently that Hollywood might be trying to suggest to people or to get people to contemplate or to think about. We talk about social justice issues. Give us an idea from watching TV now, and I'm going to confess now, and I'm not saying this because I want to big myself up, but all I watch on TV are the very best HBO dramas and sport. I don't watch a lot of other TV and news programs, obviously, so I don't see a lot of TV, but a lot of HBO dramas. Now that I think of the ones I'm watching, I'm beginning to see where you're coming from, Tiffany. So give us an idea of the types of issues at the moment that they want to normalise. Is probably not the right word, but maybe it is. Go ahead.
I would say the absolute number one thing we're seeing right now, and if you just look at what Oprah's doing on Apple, if you just look at what Prince Harry is out doing, this is all weaved throughout Hollywood. If you just look at the last tweet I just tweeted, and we just found out that Epstein was, drugging his sex slaves, we're seeing the convergence of all of these issues. And this is MKULTRA stuff that we're talking about. When you have chemicals being put into the body and into the brain, like they experimented with LSD, you're altering the consciousness. And when you're sexualizing children, you're splitting their minds. This is MKUltra tactics. So what we're seeing right now is this mass push to normalize mental illness so that everybody will be on Xanax. I can't tell you the number of kids that I hear from and that I know. And it's if your kid got in trouble at school, they want to medicate them. This has been particularly for the last 10 years, but particularly now in the mainstream. So normalizing mental illness. Listen, your kids, I don't want to tell anybody what to do, but the idea that kids should be medicated is like, it should be 1 in a million. You know what I mean? It should be very, very rare that someone has the type of maybe perhaps mental problems. But now it's they're trying to make it into the norm. And particularly it's like these two things converging, the sexualization, which they're doing through all these different movements under the guise of, you got to love everybody. Love is love, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, love is great. Love is love. But there's an absolute push to confuse the gender confusion for children. Miley Cyrus got divorced last month and is in, a lesbian relationship this month. This is all manufactured in order to influence. These people aren't doing what it is they want to do. They're feeding the eye that feeds them back. This is how this works. And so it's, if you push the right agenda, and Oprah's right on cue with all of this, with her new show on Apple, it's all about mental illness. It's getting the youth, particularly the youth, and particularly the parents, to buy in, because we're the ones who have to condone all this, to take mind-altering drugs, as far as antidepressants, anti-anxiety medication, and to be sexualized. And then this is how they split the mind of the population at a young age. It's MKUltra in action right now.
I'd love to be sitting here today playing devil's advocate and contradicting it, what you're saying, and criticizing you. But I can't, because I see it as well. The mental illness thing. You mentioned Prince Harry. I've noticed something profoundly, for me, and when I say profoundly disturbing, I'm not being melodramatic, it does disturb me. I've seen people talk about mental illness, but not actually talk about mental illness, Tiffany. This is actually where I think you're totally spot on. They're talking about life problems. They're saying, you see people tweeting out, I'm glad that I can come out and talk about my mental health issues. And then they talk about basically being a bit stressed because of the expectations at work. We talk about sportsmen and women. We've got famous cricketers. I know cricket is the devil to you Americans. I know that, but but cricket is a game where the players will often leave home, travel to Australia or India or Pakistan, and stay there for 2 or 3 months. And we'll have players talk about breakdowns and mental illness. But in fact, what has happened is they've been away from their wives and young children. They've been staying in hotels while playing cricket. They've basically been put into isolation, and they go a bit stir crazy. And then later on they retire and they write about this. And they talk about breakdowns, and then people talk about, well, we need to talk about that. We need to accept that we all have these mental problems and we need help with them. Where does it go, Tiffany? Because if they want us all to believe that we're all coping with mental illness, because I think they want every man, woman and child on planet Earth to accept that, whether we like it or not, we've got some sort of mental health problems. What follows on is, well, maybe we need to take something. Where does that end up? With us all medicated 24/7? Is that where it goes?
Well, we're so much easier to control, because when you're broken, and where you believe you're broken and you're not whole and you're not well, those are going to be people that you can easily control. And at the end of the day, this is about controlling populations. And if you just take Hollywood as a microcosm, and you look at these people, Prince had the word slave, written on his face.
Yeah.
We don't think of these people as slaves, but they are the ultimate gilded cage. They literally are slaves. I think Moby came out and said that, the CIA was telling him he had to go out and talk about Russia and, tell people what to think about the Hillary Clinton election. He came out and said the CIA was telling him he had to say all this stuff.
He did.
These people... Yeah, I don't know if you remember that. That was in 2016. These people are not free. These people don't have the liberty that we think they have. Their voice is not their own. So where this ends is all of us like that, right? So not like that in the sense that we all get to live the life of a Kardashian, but with Hollywood as a microcosm, these people are medicated. Right now what's going on with Britney Spears and that whole trial, it's all about her mental health care and how she's been kept medicated all of these years, and she's being kept isolated. All of these same things that we're talking about, these are all MKUltra tactics. And for me, I think where it ends is we're awakening as a population on a level that is so profound, and it is happening so fast that I think these are the last-ditch efforts to keep control over a population who is starting to wake up to the fact that we're actually born sovereign. This is all what's happening in the UK right now. Everybody's waking up to the sovereignty that is our birthright. And that was the idea that America was founded on. And, that's the whole thing of America is supposed to be this beacon. We're supposed to be a beacon of this idea, just this idea that humans are born sovereign and free, and our governments are there to, do what we want them to do, and no more, no less. They're there to assist and aid in this keeping of our sovereignty. But none of that is what goes on in Hollywood. It's always like, to me right now, there's a paradigm between liberation and enslavement. And everything I put through this filter of, does it liberate or does it enslave? And that's like, you can clearly see everything that we've had in this false world around us is all of this stuff that's enslaves. Google enslaves, in a way. It's supposed to liberate. And it did liberate, and it could liberate if it was just a real algorithm of real information. We would be quantum right now. I don't even think we'd be in the same dimension. If Google was, we'd have already left the dimension or something. But it's enslaved. It's meant to keep us here. It's meant to keep us, it's all connected for me. And I think that the medication and everything, it goes to a place where we can stay enslaved versus becoming liberated. Not just numbed, but prevented from thinking. You're talking about Hollywood productions that are normalizing the sexualization of children. It stands to reason then that it's connected to some of what we're seeing in the UK at the moment, which is really a lunatic asylum. And I don't say that, again, to be melodramatic. I'm not a practicing Christian. I don't know whether I'm an atheist or an agnostic. I don't know anymore. But having grown up in Catholicism, it's understandable why I turned away from religion, particularly in Ireland with the abuse scandals. And, great friends of mine, one great friend in particular, was horrifically abused by a priest in our parish. And I think we see parents now coming together in Birmingham, in the Midlands, in the United Kingdom, to try and prevent primary schools from introducing sexual education classes to 4-year-olds. And you're probably, well, I know you're aware of this because you're a journalist that's on top of it. But, it's been reported in the last few days, and I don't just believe the tabloids, I dig into it myself, but self-touching lessons are going to be given to 5 and 6-year-olds, not in the entire UK, but in one location in the south of the country, in one borough, in one region. All the schools there, governed by one local authority, are going to talk to children about touching their genitals and how it can give them pleasure and how there isn't anything wrong with it. Now, I'm not exaggerating that. And some of your followers who've joined us today, welcome, by the way, first time maybe listening to this program, nice to have you on board. They might think, this is crap, this guy's, he's gone all Alex Jones here, he's just making this up. I'm not making it up. They want to, against the express wishes of the parents, talk to children about touching themselves, Tiffany. I think that this system that's been over this planet is just, it's really reached the point where it's telling us exactly what it is. It's always, listen, you couldn't have systemic child sex abuse going on at the level that it's been going on for as long as it's been going on over this planet, and this all not already have been there. This is always there. But we're in revelation. We're in a revelation right now where the mask is being completely pulled away. So it's interesting that these things are revealing themselves. And I think we have to be very conscientious about knowing and calling it all what it is. That's abuse. That's child abuse. That's child sex abuse. Listen, children are not sexual beings. They're not. They're just not. And anyone trying to sexualize children needs to be quarantined onto an island that we then burn.
Let me jump in because I agree with you. But what I can't understand, and maybe you'll have some insight. Tiffany FitzHenry, by the way, go to tiffanyfitzhenry.com to read all about her. Read the articles, links on the website to YouTube videos made by Tiffany. She's live on the line from Atlanta. You are with the Richie Allen Show, live on Fab Radio 2 here in Manchester. TuneIn Radio as well, of course, multiple other platforms around the world. Tiffany, yes, it is, and quarantine them, exile them to an island. But there have got to be people involved in this at local authority level. There's got to be head teachers, and there's got to be teachers. Some of them are not evil, but yet they find themselves going along with it. Why is that? you're outraged. I'm outraged. I don't have. I'd love to have children. You have your own children. I mean, I can imagine what you would do to a teacher if back in the day. I mean, you're not a. I mean, we're about the same age. You're a young woman. Your children are not old. But when your daughter or your son was 5 or 6, and you learned that a teacher talked to them about masturbation, you might be a nice lady, Tiffany. I think you'd probably punch them. So,
I would go mental.
You'd go mental.
I mean, I'd go absolutely out of my mind.
Wouldn't you? So why do some people go along with it? They're not all evil, surely.
I think that this is the time when everyone has to choose. And for whatever reason, we've all chosen to be here at this moment. But everything's been leading up to this. And I don't believe that half-heartedly. I know it in every cell in my body. I know in every bone in my body that this is a time when everyone is going to have to choose. So the world that we've been living in, the world that Hollywood has been instrumental in helping create, which is why, I think that I was put through everything I was put through to see what that all really was, and then have the type of personality that I have and the heart that I have to come out and tell the world instead of just work the system that I now understand. But to have to choose, like, there's a world that we could all build that functions on liberation and the liberation of humanity. And it's a world that we don't even have a concept for the abundance. We don't even have a name for it. We don't even have a concept for all of the peace and abundance that we can create as humans. We have everything we need to create a human paradise, everything we need. And then there's the world that has existed, the world that has existed by means of us being asleep and being kept asleep. And so people, it's a brave thing to move from one world to the other. In the new world, you're not, I'm not doing a deal with Disney. I'm building my own studio, right? And in the new world, I enable other artists and other filmmakers who then I don't own, who then go on to have power of their own, who say whatever they want, who go make their own movies, who then enable other artists to go make their own movies. It's self-regenerating abundance. And that's the world that people need to understand, that when you're somebody working at one of these schools, you're feeding the eye. If you're allowing the systemic child sex abuse of 4-year-olds by teaching them things that are infinitely beyond their comprehension and sexualize them, which is child abuse, you're feeding the eye. You're being called to choose. And you might be a good person, but right now is the time when you have to make that distinction to the world and energetically. You need to leave that job. You need to become a whistleblower. You need to call me on the phone and let me tell the story to the world that this is going on at this school in the UK. Because this is if we're the adults of this planet, right? If we don't do something, who's going to? It's like, this is why a lot of people want to let the kids run things, because the kids are kids. Their whole brain is not fully formed, their frontal lobe is their decision making, all that stuff. And so it's like, if we don't stand up as the adults of this planet, who's going to? You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. And this, what we're talking about, segues into gender identity. And, we talk about Hollywood again, and I'm connecting the dots while listening to you. There are a number of programs, I'm being told on Twitter by our listeners, there are a number of programs which are very successful at the moment about drag queens. And drag queens are, being asked to come into primary schools to read stories for children. And at the same time, very young children are being told that they can transition, or that they can be put on puberty blocking drugs because they're confused about their gender identity. And I must say this, not to signal my virtue, because I'm such a lovely guy. I'm not doing that. But none of us care about what people choose to be. If people choose to live as a man or a woman, they've got every right as a human being to live as they want to live, and they deserve to be treated with, respect and not to be abused or harassed. And we would all accept that. But when you start kind of asking children to consider this stuff, Tiffany, and then you see that while this is happening in schools, the TV programs are mirroring what's going on. The dramas, the fictional dramas which you described earlier on, drag queens, gender identity. The BBC says that there are 100 gender identities now for children to choose from.
And then they want you to believe the quote science about the Earth that's been here for 5 billion years and is going to be here for another 5 billion years, whether we're on it or not, right? So it's like, I can look down, you can look down your own pants and know what gender you are. And your gender is one of two things, and it's in every cell in your body. Every single cell in your body is firing with the imprint and the code of what that gender is that you are. And people don't have to have these definitions of the problem is we don't have any working definition of the feminine and the masculine. We don't have any role models or working definition of what it means to be a man and what it should mean in the modern world, where we're not running from lions and we're not hunter-gatherers, and what does it mean? What is masculinity? Because it's important and it's a thing. It's how we all got here, right? We all got here through the union of man and woman. So there can actually be 100 genders. It's about getting us to be as distanced from the truth of what we are as possible. That's what this agenda is about, and it's completely dark. And yeah, people can live how they want, and I've never had any problem with any person expressing whatever. I never even gave it much thought until they started to come after the children. And once you start coming after the children, it's like, I'm sorry, hang on, and start saying that there are 100 genders when the two genders that exist are the only reason that all of us are here. Then you just have to really look people in the eye and be like, what's your agenda? What's your point? Because you clearly have gone completely off the rails of logic. And, it really unravels very fast. And it's about distancing us from the truth of what we are, because what we are is so powerful. Like Tiffany, I said before, we have everything we need to build what we want. But they have us tricked into building what they want. What they want. We're going to take a very quick break for headlines. It'll only take us 90 seconds or thereabouts. Then we'll come back and we'll pick it up. And I want to talk a little bit about Jeffrey Epstein. I'd like to talk about people like Bono and George Clooney and who these people are. 'Cause you've got some really interesting insights into how these people are used to push various narratives. So it's great to have you on the programme. Tiffany FitzHenry is live on the line from Atlanta. Her website is tiffanyfitzhenry.com. If you haven't checked it out before, please do. Tiffany's going to stay there. You've got 2 minutes if you want to grab a glass of water, Tiffany, or a juice or something, and then we'll come right back. I'm going to take the headlines briefly. We'll have headlines, and then we'll come back with more from Tiffany FitzHenry. You don't want to miss this. It's really important stuff, all right? I was hoping to have headlines. All the best laid plans of mice and men and all the rest of it. Let's see, can we do that? We mightn't have headlines. No, we won't take headlines. We will be back with Tiffany, though, in about 90 seconds' time.
Renowned healer Mark Bayersky travels the world to find the most unique and powerful crystals for self-healing. Since the ancient times, crystals have been used as healing tools. They hold a natural healing vibration and are highly charged in positive energy. Mark teaches how to channel the universal energy and transfer it to the crystal to activate its healing power. Each crystal is used for its unique ability to target a different physical or emotional challenge. Mark Bayersky is an author, healer, speaker, and founder of the Pure Energy Healing Academy. He shares powerful messages of inspiration and healing on his daily YouTube videos, reaching millions worldwide. Mark's crystals, healing oils, and incense sticks are most sought after by other healers. His collection is available online at www.markbayersky.com. His work is presented through Lemon House, a company that creates and curates consciously made gifts.
The Richie Allen Show relies on your support. Go to richieallen.co.uk and set up a monthly donation today.
Welcome back to the programme. It is Monday's Richie Allen Show, the 23rd of September 2019. Tiffany FitzHenry is live on the line from Atlanta. Remarkable stuff this. I'm glad you've joined us this afternoon. Thanks for the tweets, by the way. Lots of them. Tiffany is the author of a best-selling trilogy, The Oldest Soul, which can be found on Amazon. She's a public speaker. She is a whistleblower, and we've been talking about Hollywood and why it exists, what programming is all about in Hollywood, what the films and the television shows are really all about, and what it is they're designed to do. She's got her own studio. She's got a forthcoming documentary coming out. You can find her at tiffanyfitzhenry.com. Thanks for staying with us, Tiffany. Really important stuff, this. And you've been tweeting out quite a bit, by the way, about Bono and Clooney and others, and you've written about them extensively on your website, tiffanyfitzhenry.com. I'm particularly fascinated by Bono because I was a super fan of U2 in the 80s and 90s. And I've got my own series about what happened to Bono, which you might or might not be interested in, but it goes back to a time in 1991, well, it would be 1992 actually, when they were on tour in the United States and they were first introduced to Bill Clinton by George Stephanopoulos. And I think that was a watershed moment for Bono and who Bono went on to be, but that's neither here nor there. I'm very interested in that. These people, Clooney, Johnny Depp, Angelina, and then rock stars like Bono and others, they're not, again, you don't believe who they appear to be. We idolise them, or at least I used to idolise them, but they're not just world travellers who happen to have a gift that they're sharing with the world. There's something else going on.
Oh yeah, they're a controlled influence. This is what, listen, a lot of people can sing. I love U2's music. I, for the last 20 years, have loved U2's music. A lot of people can make great music. It's who's elevated and why. So the deep dive into, and I haven't started my deep dive into Bono yet, so I would really love to read what you've got, what you just mentioned, because I asked people who they wanted me to dig into next, and you know, he was a name that just kept coming up again and again. So I haven't really dug into him yet. I mean, I know what a lot of people know. I know about his alter egos, Mr. McFisto, and all this weird stuff. And I would immediately start looking into military history. A lot of these people have military intelligence in their background in terms of their parents or their grandparents. And, and for him with the Catholic upbringing and all that, I assume that possibly he was abused as a child. Because what happens is why there's so much, systemic child sex abuse, and now they're trying to do it on a mass scale, is because you want to create someone like Bono or whoever's going to get elevated, right? Like Bono. There are people, he doesn't just get to have all that influence that he garners by getting his song played on the radio 55 billion times. There are power structures around all of it. So his song doesn't just end up on the radio. Taylor Swift's song doesn't just end up on the radio 55 billion times a day. It's being put there by someone, right? By some machine, by some system, right? And it's that system that owns that influence that they garner once we all sing their songs and we all buy their albums and we all go to their concerts. And then, they step into, okay, we need you to talk about climate change at your concert. We need you to go. And someone like Bono is like, to me, the equivalent of a George Clooney, in the music world, because now he's got all these foundations and he's got all these charities, and all of this stuff is a big red flag, and it's a big scam, and it's dark. It's very, very dark. And the craziest thing is that this is what we thought were the great things going on our planet, right? It's really shocking. And it's not what we thought.
Tell us, before we talk about Clooney, all I can share really about, I wrote an article about Bono, and I did a monologue once, Tiffany. Now, this is your show, by the way, so I'm going to make this brief and shut up so people can hear you. They hear enough of me. Tiffany FitzHenry is our guest. But just to share you what I think I know about Bono. I mean, I would have seen the band live for the first time in the very late 80s, and I would have loved them. And at that time, they were obsessed with America, but also with Central America. And Bono was obsessed with the very dark side of America, the underbelly of the intelligence agencies. And a lot of The Joshua Tree, which is obviously their biggest ever album, is at once a kind of a homage to America, but it's also incredibly critical of America and what the United States intelligence agencies did in Chile in 71, what they did in 73, I'm supposed to be a history graduate. I'm all over the place here. What they did in Central America, Nicaragua, and all that sort of stuff. It was really good stuff. And Bono certainly would have spoken during U2's live performances in the 80s, even in the mid 80s, to the audiences, not lectured them, but spoke to them about the terrible things their governments were doing. Not just the US government, but the UK government. And it was profound stuff, you know, it wasn't boring, monotonous stuff. It was very, very profound stuff, and he was very serious. And I think somebody saw that, Tiffany. And I think somebody thought, we can turn this to our advantage. And when they had a rotten time with the Rattle and Hum movie and album, which wasn't very well received. And then they had a complete transformation. You talked about Mr. McFisto. They made Achtung Baby. He started wearing leather suits, bug eye black glasses. The imagery in the songs, which were amazing, like you said, brilliant songs, but all of a sudden very sexual imagery in the songs. You know, a very sleazy kind of approach. The live shows were multimedia extravaganzas where he was wearing satanic imagery and stuff like that. It just came out of nowhere. And then he began palling around with Bill Clinton at that time, and he was introduced to Clinton by George Stephanopoulos. And I think things began to change there. Now, that's my crazy tinfoil hat story, Tiffany, right?
Well,
but that's what it is.
You know, it's not tinfoil hat. And as of now, we already know that both George Stephanopoulos and Bill Clinton were involved with Jeffrey Epstein. So there's something that happens, and I've had, you know, some knowledge of what goes on, particularly not just in Hollywood, but in the music industry. And it does come down to selling your soul. And you can very clearly, almost always, see the point in which that transaction occurred. And like you have it nailed there. It sounds to me like, you know, he started out as one thing, and it's similar to me. It's like, okay, great. She can write all these great scripts. Well, okay, bring her in, and then she'll start churning out the, It's about controlling influence. It's about controlling culture. Because what people don't understand, this is so important for us to understand, because we just think of these things that we consume, Netflix, TV shows, the music we listen to, we think of it as entertainment, and we think about politics all wrong. We think politics is the big thing. But what politicians know and what the world shapers know is that in reality, politics is downstream from culture. Culture's way upstream. Culture is shaping politics, not the other way around. So they're busy shaping culture. That's why they're shaping culture, because politics is downstream from culture. So that's something that people don't really realize. And that's why somebody like Barack Obama is now at Netflix, is because, you know, the pen is mightier than the sword. Those who tell the stories rule the world, right? And so someone like Bono, who has this cultural influence, is, you know, okay, you want to really be a star? You want to be a billionaire? You want to be, you know, and there was that moment when I was doing the Clooney breakdown where you could clearly see that shift. Now he's the $1 billion man.
Tell us about him, Tiffany. Tiffany FitzHenry is our guest, by the way, folks. If you're just joining the programme, and I know people are joining, welcome to it, by the way, tiffanyfitzhenry.com. We've covered quite a lot of ground here. Tiffany is a Hollywood whistleblower. She's seen it inside and outside, from inside it and from afar, as a screenwriter. She's an author, and she's got her own production company. She's got a forthcoming documentary. And we've talked about Hollywood, how basically Hollywood programs people to think whatever the agenda is. And we've talked about Bono and others. We've talked about films, the sexualization of children. We've talked about mental health. Clooney, then, this guy that everyone's mum and everyone's aunt fell in love with when he was on ER. This genial, easygoing, rugged, good-looking actor. Not the best in the world. I wouldn't have said he was the best actor of all time. But all of a sudden, he's in everything. What happened? Who is this guy, do you think?
Well, I think, you know, we're starting to see incredible patterns emerging because we know what we're looking at. And we're paying attention to things like, well, who were his parents, right? And what does that really mean? So you go back and you look at somebody like Clooney, and he's got multiple famous family members. Rosemary Clooney is his aunt. Yeah. Another one of his aunts, Betty Clooney, also another famous singer. another famous singer. I can't remember her name. It escapes me. And then you've got his father. His father's TV talk show host, game show host, journalist. It seems to me, right, there are certain families, the Barrymore family, there's no limit to these sort of families that have multiple people in it that seem to just be so talented and so much more talented than the rest of us, right? That they just make all these great inroads into entertainment. Or is it something else? So we start looking at, okay, well, he came up through the Catholic Church as well. George Clooney did. And he's never spoken out about any abuse or anything like that. But you can sort of start to see all these patterns emerging, right? So if someone were to eventually have this great fame, you know, what we have are a lot of people who have great fame and great influence who have had fractured minds from the time they were very young. Yeah. So they're easily controllable. They're puppets. And so then he goes and he studies acting for 5 years with one of the biggest Scientologists in Hollywood, who also trained Rob Reiner. And it was known in the Beverly Hills Playhouse that the acting school, that you had to follow everything to the letter in this very Scientology infused way. And then your career would be going well. Well, Scientology is all about compromising yourself. It's all about confession. It's all about telling your secrets. It's, you know, it's an intelligence tactic. So who this guy is somebody who's been, you know, on this road since the very beginning of his career. And the very first movie that he did was based on a book by one of the biggest known CIA writers to have ever been. So from the very beginning, he's mixed up in a web of Scientology, CIA, you know, he's an altar boy since the time he was little. So you can only sort of start to draw these conclusions of all of these themes that we're now seeing. Yeah, and how people are controlled. I'm
fascinated by this. A lot of comment on it, by the way. I'll read a few tweets and we'll get back with Tiffany FitzHenry is on the line. Let me read a few tweets here, lots of them. A lot of discussion about the merits and the demerits of U2's music on Twitter at the moment. Big argument about whether they're any good or not. I respectfully disagree with those who say that they are trite. I'm with Tiffany. Some amazing songs written by the band over the years, whatever you think of them. Hi to Faisal, who's listening to this with great interest. To Mwinga again, who says, don't forget Clooney is married to Amal Clooney, the famed international lawyer. That's significant, says Mwinga. I appreciate that. Number of you tweeting out certain cartoons to me. Thanks very much for that. Hi to John Stott as well. Let me scroll on down. Joe tweets, a lot of people talk about these alien invasions. I don't know. I'll put this to Tiffany in a minute. I don't know how significant this is. A lot of people talk about the proliferation of science fiction shows in recent years that talk about invasions. That doesn't necessarily mean that there will be an alien invasion. That might be something else. It might be symbolic of something else that might be coming for humanity. A number of you have tweeted about vaccines and how Bono and others have been used to push aid to African countries, but not real aid, because we think of aid incorrectly. We think that when we send state aid to Africa, it's lovely, it's crops, it's seeds, it's the building materials for schools. It isn't. We know it isn't. Countries are given aid so long as they spend it the way they are told to spend it, and often it's on medicine and it's on vaccines. And you know, and Tiffany will know this, a lot of African countries receive state aid, particularly sub-Saharan African countries. They only get it if big pharmaceutical companies are allowed to offer the citizens of that country money to participate in drug trials. This is true. This is sickening and disgusting. And this is how they get drugs passed. They get the poorest people in the world to participate in drug trials. Some of them die, some of them get very ill, but it's all brushed under the carpet because it takes place in sub-Saharan Africa. But a number of you are making that point, that Bono, and you know, so let me ask you, Tiffany, you do believe that the likes of Clooney and Bono, that they are unwitting participants in this? Because I think you're right. If that's what you think, I think you're probably right there. They don't really know what's going on.
Well,
maybe they do.
I think you've got certain people who don't know what's going on. I think you've got Billie Eilish, right? This new singer who's just a young teen girl.
Yeah.
she doesn't know what's going on. Someone like Clooney, someone like Bono, no, they're soldiers. They're lieutenants in this thing. They know exactly who they work for. And in Clooney's case, it's, one part CIA, one part Boeing and Lockheed Martin, and also the sort of people who want a global economic order over this planet, the people who are trying to, have everybody under one world government. These are the people that they work for, and they know that. People like Clooney and Bono know exactly who they work for.
Oh, do you know what, Tiffany? Do you know what? I'm going to give you kudos there, because in the 80s, Bono used to talk about the respect for sovereign borders, respect for sovereign countries. He was huge on this. Leave countries alone. Now Bono says borders are a real problem. It's incredible, isn't it? In 2019, I know he's been saying it for a few years now, but borders are a big problem to getting things done. Right. Wow. I mean, that's a proper flip-flop, isn't it? Respect borders on the one hand and then don't respect them.
It's like right now, since I'm speaking all of this truth, it's resonating with so many people. It would be like the powers that be coming to try to own me, because now I've got all this credibility, right, as someone who speaks the truth. So then now I've got all these people who are just going to believe everything I say because I'm that girl who was exposing all that stuff. Yeah. That's how this works. So almost somebody like Bono, who was saying what was resonating with humanity at the time, is a perfect candidate too to become controlled influence. Because he's already earned that credibility by saying what's really resonating, and then you just sort of transition those people to the message that you want through the influence of culture.
And do you think back in the day, going back to Bono, because you two are so huge. I mean, Noel Gallagher is right. You two are the Beatles of their era. I mean, it's a massive band. Regardless of whether you think they're crap, if you think the Edge is an average guitar player, it doesn't matter. Over 250 million albums. Massive band. They tour today. Their albums the last couple of albums were poor. You still can't get a ticket to see them. They're huge. Somebody would have looked at him in the 80s telling the truth and thought he's a very powerful communicator. Mm-hmm. We could use him.
Exactly. And that's exactly how this works. It's nothing. That's what this is. That's what you're looking at. When you look at someone like Bono, Oprah, they're really elevating these Jonas Brothers right now, right? They're elevating them. Yeah. And the new wife is, I don't even know her name, Priyana Chopra or something. This girl, they're positioning her to be a real agent of influence. And you can see them doing it. And that's simply because these people are owned. These kids, these Jonas Brothers, I would bet the whole farm and all the tea in China that they were sexually abused from the time they were very little. And so they're easily controlled. And so you can elevate them because they're just little receptacles of controlled influence. That's all they are. And we have to stop. And that's why we have to stop having this idol worship in general, because you can really enjoy someone's music. You can love their art. You can love what they create. But this whole idea that, we worship these idols is very pagan.
Isn't it?
It's very, yeah. Mm-hmm. It's ridiculous.
Did you, Tiffany, hear Greta Thunberg at the United Nations summit in New York today?
Dear God.
Can I play a bit of it? Can I play a few seconds of it just for our listeners?
Yeah, I was looking into her, actually.
This is crazy stuff. So there's a climate summit at the United Nations building in New York today. Not everybody is there, but some people are there. I'm going to play a bit of this because you talk about control. I found this a bit creepy. Again, I'm not trying to be dramatic about it. I found this a bit creepy. So regardless of whether you believe in man-made climate change or whether you don't, it's irrelevant. This is a 17-year-old young woman, and this is her speaking this afternoon. Have a listen to this, Tiffany, and then tell us what you think when we come back.
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words, and yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?
What do you think of that when you hear her speaking there? What comes to mind when you hear that?
Oh my God. Well, I think I could have, if I were writing a movie, if I were writing a fictional movie, that's the exact speech I would write. It seems like something a screenwriter would write. It seems like something out of a fiction. It absolutely is. It doesn't resonate with me as any form of truth. It seems like she's acting. If you read her, well, and it's such a manipulation. It's such a manipulation, and it reeks of manipulation. Emotional, psychological. It's demonic because of all the manipulation layers. It's just absolutely the darkness. We can take care of the planet, but we don't need our governments. It's this whole thing of, galvanizing us, trying to get there to be a big enough problem that will galvanize us to take a one world government, basically.
Yeah, that's it.
And that's it. And it's so transparent, and it's so obvious, and it's insulting. And now they're trotting out this girl. It's like the whole thing just is like a bad movie. It's like watching a bad movie.
It's like Children of the Corn, to be honest, and I'm not saying that for a laugh, because you've got Greta in Sweden, God love her, and you've got Jean Hinchcliffe in Australia, and they're actually using language like, and again, I'm not making this up, it's there for anybody to see, they're saying, we're coming for you. It's like Malachi and Isaac in Gatlin in Children of the Corn, Why are you coming for me? I didn't do anything to you. It's crazy stuff, right?
And I got news for you. It's not the straws. It's these giant multinational corporations, right? Who've been, raping and pillaging every country and, polluting and doing things. It's not you and me. It's it's always the conglomerates and the companies. It's not your and my straw at lunch that's ruining the planet, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's exactly, Tiffany. I've got to read a couple of tweets or I'll be hammered. Do you want to stay with us for another 15, 20 minutes so we can talk about Epstein for a bit? Do you want to do that? If you've got an engagement, don't worry about it. I can soldier on.
I'd love to stay.
Well, thanks for staying. TiffanyFitzHenry.com. You can follow Tiffany on Twitter as well. If you're on Twitter, there's only one Tiffany FitzHenry. So if you search it on Twitter, you'll get straight to Tiffany. Follow her there. Tens of thousands do already. Very humble lady, this. Excellent writer, reader at the website. Again, I'm going to say it again, TiffanyFitzHenry.com. Charlotte tweets in Burnley in the northwest. Interesting how Tiffany mentioned them being brought up through the Catholic Church. Her next deep dive maybe should be US talk show hosts or news anchors, because I find it interesting, tweets Charlotte. Both Jimmy Fallon and Carson Daly wanted to be priests. And she also goes on to say Stephen Colbert did and is an ordained minister. Bill Maher is a Roman Catholic, and Conan O'Brien, says Charlotte. I wonder, is she onto something? Yeah. And these are top presenters, right? These are big guys.
Well, and what if because patterns don't lie. People can lie, agendas can lie, the news can lie, but patterns don't lie. That's why that's a brilliant tweet, and I'm going to absolutely dig into that.
And you know something else? Here's something else, and this is, I'm very rarely right on anything, but many of these, and I only know this because Bono said it himself. A few years ago, Bono did an interview, and he can be decent in interviews, to be fair to him. I mean, he's very egotistical. He's definitely a megalomaniac, but at times in interviews he can be very revealing and very, very disarmed. I can't remember who he spoke with, but he said, one thing I discovered, he said, along the road about people like me, and my ears pricked up straight away, He said, I meet a lot of obviously famous actors and actresses, and I meet a lot of very successful musicians. And he said, one thing many of us have in common, and I'm on the edge of my seat, Tiffany. And then he said, many of us lost our mothers when we were 11, 12 or 13 years old. He said that, and I'll never forget it. And he named a number of people that he knew in his own inner circle, well-known entertainers, who lost their mum, not their dad, but their mum, when they were young. And I thought, wow, I thought that's very interesting. Did it mean, there was a profound change in the person? Did they need to express themselves in a certain way? But now I'm beginning to wonder, is it even more significant losing the mum at an early age? It must be. You talk about patterns. That's a pattern right there.
Well, another pattern that goes along with that is, why does Disney always kill the mother?
Go on. I didn't know that. Tell me. How did...
Well, all the way up through Roseanne, right? Disney always kills the mother. If you go and you look at all of the Disney movies, all of the, the whole theme that, there's always Disney always kills the mother. And it's an occult thing. And it's what we're doing right now. It's, if the divine feminine energy on this planet were ever to be, I guess I would say, unabated, whatever, it would take the world and heal it and love it, to all the illusion would melt away, all of the ego that keeps us in all this stuff. So it's like, by killing the mother, right, and by having that archetype of the dead mother, it's sort of like a block from truth in a way, because look, we're all living on this Mother Earth, right?
Yeah.
It's part and parcel to this there's man and woman thing. It's distancing us from the truth of what we are. It's if you want to get super spiritual about it.
Have we killed nurture then? Did the sexual revolution kill nurture? I interviewed a feminist some years ago, and she was lovely. She was very militant, but she was lovely. And I said to her, maybe working for big corporations and making loads of money is not feminism. Maybe that's not equality. Maybe it's insane. Maybe somebody gave you that idea. Because I don't want to work for a big corporation and live an insane life. Maybe the most important thing you can do in the world is give birth to a child and raise it. Maybe that's the most intelligent thing that you could do. And did something interfere with that, do you think? Feminists will want to kill me now for saying that, but anyway, I don't care. What do you think?
Oh, that's such an
I know it's massive.
question.
It's massive.
I know, because at the end of the day, maybe bringing women into the workforce too is just, hey, why just have one person in the household feeding the eye when we could have two? I always talk about feeding the eye because it's like that whole system of, wake up, grow up, go to school, go to college, get a job, drive to work, sit in a cubicle. It's like Fight Club, right? Breaking out of that, like someone like myself, right? Where it's like, okay, I could be using my talents to feed the eye, to feed this agenda, and to be a part of this system that I have every right and reason and ability to be a part of, but instead choosing what I think is the more intelligent to build outside this system, right? So maybe it was a sham that women as well were encouraged to come feed the eye and, get into this rat race system, because maybe the women are the builders, right? We could build, we take a house and we make it a home.
Yeah.
And so we could be building outside this system, just like many women right now are building their kids up instead of sending them through the system with homeschool. I really admire these women and these homeschoolers. It's, I'm fortunate that my kids are about to graduate from school. And so it's like, but if I were having children right now, I think I would probably, homeschool them with the sex education that's going on now. But to bring the women into the workforce, maybe it was, not to our best interest. And I don't mean to say women should be at home. I mean to say, maybe we should all be at home, making podcasts, building gardens, having chickens, raising them, living off of, our communities and our neighbors. And maybe none of us should be out feeding the eye. It's not an women thing. It's like a human thing.
But the most important thing that anybody could do, I mean, I come from Ireland, obviously, and I knew very strong women that never worked, but they were strong women. They ran the homestead. They ran it. They ran it financially. They built a home, as you said. They raised the children. They kept everybody in line. And he went to a factory and he came home and he brought the money home, which was, I suppose, the latter day version of bringing home the rabbits for rabbit stew, and that's what it was. That's not anti-feminist or sexist. That's the way it was. But maybe something got in the way of that. This is unbelievably interesting. This 26 minutes to the top of the hour. Tiffany FitzHenry, our guest, a great friend of mine, Jean-Anne Crowley, actress herself in massive productions, television, film, and theatre. Listening to this with great interest. She reminds us about Aaron Russo. Freedom to Fascism, of course. Aaron Russo was one of the producers of Trading Places, I believe, and Rockefeller told him about funding feminism and Gloria Steinem and all of that. Very interesting stuff, Jean-Anne. Let me read a couple of more tweets before Tiffany comes back in there. Sarah says, you're right about Disney killing the mum, the mother. In fact, in most Hollywood films, the mother is replaced with the evil stepmom, or the teenager is having a hard time because they are grieving the loss of a mum. Maybe not most films, Sarah, but I'll tell you what, certainly lots of them. Mimi is enraptured by what you're saying. Fantastic guest, says Mimi. Is Tiffany on Facebook? Are you, Tiffany? You must be on Facebook.
Yep, I am. I don't. A lot of people post a lot of my stuff there, so it's a good place to find a lot of my articles and everything. And I do have you can go to official Tiffany FitzHenry on Facebook and follow me there. Yes.
Really good stuff. Sutty's Rehab says Kenny Everett spent 2 years in what he called the Priest Factory. That's Kenny Everett, a very funny British comedian who died some years ago. He died of AIDS. So Jeffrey Epstein then, because you're painting a picture for me now that I can understand and I can buy into it. And I look at Epstein now, and I've heard people say Epstein worked for the deep state and he worked to entrap people, to compromise people. If that's true, it makes more sense now listening to you that maybe many of these people you were talking about, these very famous people, entertainers who are no longer just entertaining, but they're now out selling ideas to people. Maybe somebody like Jeffrey Epstein was keeping people in line. Who do you think Jeffrey Epstein was? What was his whole kind of raison d'etre? What was he doing, this guy, as far as you understand, Tiffany?
It's so interesting, isn't it? Like, as it unravels more and more. So just a month ago, we started, or 3 weeks ago, we started to find out the whole science part of it and the university part of it, and how he was, funneling money and putting money into almost, I would say, like eugenics programs, where there's layers and layers to this thing, and quote, like who he was. So what he started out as in our minds a year ago, or any time previous to a year ago, he was just a sick guy, one sick guy doing a bunch of sick stuff. And it's so one-dimensional that we would think that could exist, right? We were so asleep.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, there was just this one sick guy doing all this sick stuff, and yet evaded trial, evaded prosecution, only served this small amount of time. How? We never even really sat there and thought, God, there's a whole system in place that's aiding and abetting this guy. This is something so much bigger. We were asleep, and it sort of blows my mind. And then now all of a sudden it's like, okay, wow. So they were told that he wasn't to be touched because he was intelligence. He was working for intelligence. Oh my God, that's a whole nother layer. So what was Jeffrey Epstein? I mean, God, he's wrapped up with Bill Gates. What was he? I mean, clearly he was a very high level intelligence apparatus. I say all the time about Harvey Weinstein. People want to say the same thing about him. He was just this monster, and he was just this sick person. Oh yeah, definitely. He was, a completely shark-eyed, disgusting blob of a human monster. But don't forget, Harvey Weinstein was working for Disney for 30 years.
30 years.
Disney owned Miramax for 30 years. So all this time, everything. So one of the actresses who he Weinsteined has gone after Disney. She's gone after Michael Eisner. She's gone after Bob Iger personally in a lawsuit, which is what they could all do. They could all do this, and they could, I don't want to say out loud, bring down Disney, but, there's a lot of liability there. So you think to yourself, that's a lot of liability. Was Harvey Weinstein just this guy they couldn't control, or was Harvey Weinstein doing what he was designed to do? We need to start thinking more in those terms, because we've seen now that Jeffrey Epstein was more than just this sick pedophile with these weird fetishes and this island that some famous people went to. No, he was an intelligence operation, and much more. He was developing eugenics with Harvard and MIT, and gosh, that goes down a whole Nazi rabbit hole. What was he? I think we're just beginning to figure it out. But, I'm paying attention. We're all paying attention now, whereas before we were really asleep.
And he was murdered, undoubtedly. I mean, come on, they couldn't have been so bad at their jobs. This guy was the most famous prisoner in the world. There's no way they slipped up and allowed him the means to hang himself. He was either murdered, or maybe he was slipped out the back door and he's in exile somewhere. I mean, what do you think?
It could be either of those. It could. What's really good, I'll say, about all of this is that I don't try to red pill anybody in my own life. My close friends, family, those kind of people. We just talk about our kids and we talk about, real life. And I just try to stay really connected with those people. But I have mentioned to them, there's a lot more to Hollywood. There's a lot more to these things that are going on. And then during this Epstein whole debacle with, did he die? Was he murdered? How could that have happened? I'm telling you, every single one of them came to me and said, oh my gosh, you don't think he was really, you don't think he really killed himself. He was murdered. The news is lying,
really
blah,
good.
blah, blah. These are people who, were more or less asleep. And I'm like, yeah, I think you probably are onto something. You know what I mean? Like, you should dig there because that's weird. The whole thing's weird. But, because to me, it's a great red pill that we're all swallowing at the same time. And this is, this isn't necessarily, you and me might be way beyond this, but for other people, this will be the moment that they woke up.
Yeah, and here in the United Kingdom, you'll know at the moment that we've been consumed for the last 3 years with nothing other than Brexit. The people of the country voted to leave the European Union, which, Tiffany, you know all about this. I know I'm not educating you, but for some of your followers, they might not know this if they've come to the programme for the first time. The European Union is a very big pillar of a future one world government. And the people of this country saw what membership had done to their life prospects. It had devastated communities in this country. And when they were given the opportunity to vote to either stay with the European Union or for the UK to leave, they voted to leave. 17.4 million people. The biggest exercise in people's, franchise, their right to vote ever. We've never seen anything like it in this country. And every celebrity, and this is true, by the way, every celebrity, every UK film star, TV star, singer, has joined with the forces of the establishment to basically convince people that they were crazy, that they were racist, that they were ugly-minded, that they were wrong, and that we shouldn't leave. And here we are 3 years later and we haven't left. And you talk about things that might wake people up. The Epstein thing, which is laughable, this idea that he killed himself. This whole Brexit thing, I think that's working against the system, if we want to call it the system, or the agenda. I think that's helping people to realise that there's something far more sinister going on than they might have otherwise believed, Tiffany. So these things are bad things, but they're also good things, aren't they? In terms of they show people this is how it's going.
Yeah, I think that in a weird way, it all wakes us up to what we weren't paying attention to. Even though it's not an ideal situation and what's going on is not good, it's waking us up to what we weren't paying attention to. And it's that lack of paying attention that really got us a lot of our liberties taken. We weren't really paying attention when they passed the Patriot Act in the United States. We were out to lunch. We were traumatized by 9/11, all this stuff. And, this has been their MO. These people who want to have their agenda over the world. They want to have their control over the world. They want to have fewer people with more power, when what people in the UK are starting to understand in abundance, what that accomplishes and what that does, which is less liberty and less opportunity and a bigger divide between the rich and the poor. And the working class people get completely snuffed out and they get completely destroyed, and our communities get destroyed, and we have no say over our communities. And then they're telling our 4-year-olds, sex education before we know it, right? And we have no sovereignty and we have no say in our own communities. But what the truth is more people with more power and not fewer people with more power.
That's right.
The basic difference.
That's right. That's what the European Union was designed to do, to concentrate power in the hands of a tiny, tiny group of people. And you've described it absolutely perfectly. We talked earlier on with Tiffany about news that 5-6-year-olds are going to be given lessons on self-touching, which is horrendous. These are real things that are happening. This is not crazy conspiracy radio. This is real stuff. Not a loaded question, and we don't have time to get into it, but with your experience as a writer, as a script writer, was September the 11th, was that a production? Did we see a production that day? That's what got me thinking differently about the world. More so the fallout in terms of what the United States did thereafter, which kind of led me to believe that there were maybe some problems with the day itself. I know a lot of people died, but who was responsible for it? Looking at it now, 18 years, it's 18 years actually later, does it look now, looking back, like a production of sorts?
Oh, it was a production, absolutely, and it was a mass trauma event. If you want to control people, and this is what you just talked about, the sexualizing of the children, if you want to control people, you do it through trauma. And that's what the splitting of the mind is all about. And when you traumatize somebody, when we're traumatized as humans, it's kind of a way to hack the mainframe. You know, we're going along, and then you introduce a trauma. And for a child who is not a sexual being, sex is a trauma. That's a trauma to their system because they're not sexual beings when you're a child. That's an adult thing, right? And so 9/11 was a mass trauma event. So when you traumatize somebody, essentially their brain freezes and is open for programming. When you're in a state of trauma, and I believe in the United States, we were in an extended state of trauma for, months. And basically all of this programming was inserted that we're not safe, that we need the government to keep us safe, like all of these ideas that there are terrorists who are after us, blah, 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 all of these ideas. And we need to give over our liberties. Because when you have people in a traumatized state, just like they're trying to do with the children to sexualize them, you can control them and you can insert your agenda and you can insert your ideas. It's trauma-based mind control. That's what MKULTRA is all about. It's all about, this is why all of these child stars go crazy, because they've been sexually abused from the time they were little, which is part of trauma-based mind control.
And you said something very profound there. Not to juxtapose, it sounds crazy to juxtapose trauma from September the 11th with trauma in schools for children. But it's a leap that you can make, because I remember as a young boy being mortified around girls, and all the other boys were mortified. I went to a co-ed school. It was boys and girls in primary school, and it was boys and girls in secondary school. So I suppose in one way I was lucky. I never went to an all-boys school. But I remember when I was 6 or 7, feeling very awkward around girls, like every other boy did. And the girls we would play games like Kiss Chase. And if you got caught, you got a kiss on the cheek, and that was it. Crazy stuff. But I used to, innocent stuff, but I used to feel very awkward. And I know a lot of other lads as well did. So now I think, if you're in school and you're 5 or 6, and your teacher begins to talk to you about touching yourself, that is going to be traumatizing for children. Yeah.
Undoubtedly. It's a technique of mass traumatizing. Sex education shouldn't even begin until at least middle school. And even then it should be very tempered to, leave most of it up to the parents. And we don't have a problem anymore with teen pregnancy. We really don't. I mean, the numbers are just falling through the floor. So in a way, leave it for what it was. We don't have to, there's no justification. There literally is no rhyme or reason or scientific or psychological or holistic explanation for why you would be sexually educating children who are not going to be sexually active for a couple decades.
Tiffany. Amen to that. This is so important. This is the biggest story in the news today. You've got the Labour Party political conference going on in Brighton. It's crap. The biggest story we have here is that parents are taking their children out of schools. They are Asian or parents, second, third generation Asians. Maybe their religion is Islam. But you've got Christian parents joining them, which is a good thing. And they're saying, no, we're not having this. And they're taking their children out. Now, I'm not making this up. You never get anything. But straight down the line, facts when I make these radio programs, they're taking them out because they can see that what Tiffany is saying is absolutely true. It is irrefutable. You can't allow your children to be lectured by a teacher about touching themselves. These are things we find out by accident ourselves when we're much later. You find out, and the little Chinese whispers with your other school friends, and you giggle and you laugh, and it's all a bit embarrassing, and you figure it out. You do not need children to be told this stuff, and I agree with you. I didn't think, I would have said some years ago this was a bit hysterical, but I agree with you. This is traumatizing children, and it must be deliberate. It must be.
It has to be deliberate, and I really believe it's being done in tandem with the medicating, because if you just look at what are the techniques of mind control, they've been studying this for half a century, and they've been perfecting mind control techniques, and it's a combination of chemicals and sexualizing children, starting very young. These are CIA tactics. This is not, groundbreaking stuff, but I see it happening. This is a combination of what they're doing to our kids on a mass scale now. For years, I remember David Icke introducing me to Cathy O'Brien many, many years ago. And out of Cathy, I met other men and women. And I knew they weren't lying. I'm very skeptical, you see, Tiffany. I know you are as well, as a writer. I don't just believe people when they speak to me. There are some people who speak to me, and I know that they believe what they're saying. So I like them because at least they believe it. That doesn't mean I think they're right. I sometimes think this guy is convinced of something, but I don't agree with him. But I met people, victims of MKULTRA, and not only did I believe that they believed it, I also believed it. I could see it. I could see the similarities in people. And I met people from different parts of the world, and I could see it. It's profoundly disturbing stuff, this. I want to remind, because we're going to run out of time in a minute, Tiffany's website. A lot of people who follow Tiffany have come to the programme tonight. You're very welcome, by the way. We talk about these issues not all the time. We often take a very irreverent look at the news, which is either funny or profoundly boring, depending on your point of view. But that's what we do with the Richie Allen radio show out in Manchester. Tiffany's website is tiffanyfithhenry.com. You will find links there to her YouTube videos, to her channel, and the articles, which I mean are very, very well written, but also very well briefed. A lot of research goes into what she does, and as an old journalist, I really appreciate that. You have no idea how much that means to me, because I do see a lot of stuff that's very confusing and very, very ill researched, not very well researched, but Tiffany's is very well researched. I'll give you the final word before we go. Despite the gravity of this stuff, despite the darkness of it, what shines out of your writing and your tweeting is optimism. You think we're going to win in the end, don't you? I know it. I absolutely am 1,000% certain that in the end, because here's the thing, and this is why it's guaranteed. Lies are what has built all of this. You look at this pain, and you look at everything from just people in Hollywood, young kids in Hollywood going off the rails, to war that our military industrial complex has been fomenting for 70 straight years. All of these things are built on lies. So in order for all of that to occur, the lies have to be told, they have to be kept up, they have to be maintained. But the truth is like a giant machete, and it just is. The truth is like a lion, right? You don't have to defend it. You just let it out, and it defends itself. And what we're seeing right now, the amount of truth just coming like a flood, that is the elixir. And so to me, that guarantees that all of this darkness that has been built, this world, this false world, this fallen world, to be an Oprah right now, to be at the top of a fallen world, you had to go down in order to get up, right? That's how this world has worked. So when those people fall, and we're watching them all fall, and we see, oh my God, George Clooney is lecturing us about Darfur, yet he's being paid by Lockheed Martin. Dear God, these people are false idols. One by one by one by one, as they all fall, it's guaranteed that the light wins, because the truth just is. And lies have to be maintained, right? It's a lot of work that goes into creating this false world. And so to me, it's just, if you take it in that simple terms, you can't really say that the darkness is going to win when the light is so much easier. It's hard to maintain all these lies, and they won't be maintained, not with the internet and shows like this and all of us talking now. So it's game over.
I love it, Tiffany. I love it. Consider yourself, consider that you have an open door to the programme. Come back before Christmas. Come back earlier than that, and we'll pick up, because these issues lead to other issues as well that we can discuss. I'd be delighted to have you back. Tiffany FitzHenry is our guest today, and you can read her at tiffanyffitzhenry.com. She's on Twitter and on Facebook as well. There's only one. Great name, FitzHenry, by the way. We could have gotten into that. Thanks for coming on and giving us your time. You're in Atlanta this morning. I know you're busy. I really appreciate it, Tiffany. For the people who've come late to the programme, it'll be on Podomatic, iTunes and Spotify in about 25 minutes time. It'll also be on YouTube later on, and Tiffany might grab it if she wants and put it on her own YouTube channel to amplify it, because it's a very important conversation. What's happening in the United States of America is happening here. It's happening here in the UK. It's happening in my country, Ireland. It's happening in Europe. And it's about time that more and more people began to understand it. Thanks for your time, Tiffany. I've really, despite the darkness of the subject matter, you bring a lot of light to it. So thank you so much for being humble and being so approachable. And I look forward to speaking to you again in the future.
Same to you. Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Great stuff. Thanks, Tiffany. That was Tiffany FitzHenry. Go to tiffanyfitzhenry.com. And she was live in Atlanta this morning, speaking live on the Richie Allen Show. And again, thanks to Tiffany's followers, many of them getting in touch with the programme today. They didn't know about the programme, which is nice. And they listened today. They might listen again in the future. We're just about out of time. Again, tiffanyfitzhenry.com. So there you go. Interesting stuff. Yeah, the Bono stuff is really interesting. We covered a lot of ground there. But the U2, the Bono story, Joshua Tree rattling home, then decamping to Berlin, and the band's internal crisis about the direction they were going to take then, how that went to Achtung Baby, this unbelievably amazing album, regardless of what people think about U2, and the imagery in the music, the sexual imagery, the darker imagery in those songs, which led on to the multimedia extravaganza Zoo TV, which did have a lot of occult imagery in it, McFisto and all of that stuff. And it was on the Zoo TV show, which was indoors before it went outdoors in America in 1992, in the autumn of 1992. Zoo TV started indoors. It was on the road for 2.5 years, Zoo TV. One of the most amazing things I've ever seen in my life. And it was in the early days of Zoo TV that Bono met Clinton. And I think things changed for Bono then. I really do. That's my theory. Anyway, great to have Tiffany on the programme. Do read her at her website. She's on Twitter as well. Thanks to all of you who tweeted. Thanks to Gail for your tweet, Gail, about Epstein. Yes, the investigations die with Epstein, as far as I understand. And I do understand that the UK authorities have recently said they're not going to pursue any investigation into the Queen's son, Prince Andrew. Surprise, surprise! I could have played old Stilla there. Surprise, surprise! They're not going to pursue any case against Prince Andrew. Not case, sorry. They're not going to investigate any claims against him. I bet you're just falling apart with shock there. Right, Bruce was 70 today. Bruce Spring. I don't care what you think of Bruce. Things were difficult for me when I was a young man. A very young man. And I got through many a night with Bruce Springsteen. And Tunnel of Love by Bruce Springsteen is my favourite album of all time. That and Night Moves by Bob Seger are my favourite albums of all time. I love Bruce. I've been lucky enough to see him many times. He's an amazing man. And he's an amazing singer-songwriter. So I'm going to close out this programme saying happy birthday to Bruce with one of my favourite Bruce Springsteen songs of all time. It's on Tunnel of Love. In fact, it's the third track on the album. It's called All That Heaven Will Allow. And when I hear it, I think of the future Mrs. Allen, who's an amazing woman. Thanks for listening this Monday. Look after yourselves and one another. Thanks to Tiffany. Have a brilliant rest of your day. See you tomorrow. Love you. Bye.